Hi Vincent, and welcome to Walk in the Park.
Hi, thanks for the invitation.
It's amazing to meet you here in St. Gallen at
Yes.
Start Summit, which is the big gathering for 7,000 plus people organized only by students. I'm looking forward to explore your story because usually in Walk in the Park we invite founders to share about their journeys. So you are one of the co-founders of Nexthink, one of the Swiss unicorns.
Correct, yes. Yeah.
Let's walk.
Thank you.
So the first question I usually ask is, do you have walk and talks often in your life?
I had walk and talks a lot with employees. Instead of doing meetings, in a room, in a usual atmosphere, I realized that going first outside in a more like neutral environment and also more inspiring maybe than an office with usual furnitures and usual also pressure probably, and the boss sits here, and so yeah, we had a lot of we were lucky enough to be by Lake of Geneva, a few minutes walk, so going by the lake, having a discussion on serious and non-serious topics, and sometimes brainstorming, sometimes tougher discussion to solve conflicts, and so yeah, I had more for that.
That sounds very inspiring.
I'm very used to talk while walking because I'm also a passionate mountaineer. So, you talk a lot with people you go in the mountain with when it's easy path and not a difficult technical section. So it's a very good way to basically set the, a very, let's say, non-hierarchical conversation between people. When you are outside, it's a very good way to break the barriers between people.
Exactly. Do you think your employees were actually happy of doing those kind of meetings outside? They were grateful?
If they were asking for a raise and they got it, they probably did, yes. But at least when you offer that and propose to do that, it's also like a positive surprise, something different. So it's also part of maybe a culture or when you are here to drive innovation, change, disruption. I was always saying, we try to do something new. We also have to do a lot of new things. So the way we sell, the way we organize meetings, the way we organize events, the way we write a press release. Let's do creative, different in everything we do, so that you have a better chance also to, I think, convince about your own reason for being here to drive some new things forward.
Yeah, talking about doing new things. You started the company 20 years ago.
Yes,
a
roughly,
bit more of that, right?
Yeah.
And then before that you've been a professional athlete, you've been cycling, and now you call yourself a passionate skier and mountaineer.
Correct.
So a lot of things around extreme environment.
Yes, but extreme for myself, and then I don't think I did anything like being the best at what I do, but at least I always try to be the best at what I can do myself. And then for me, there is always somebody better. There are bigger startups, maybe more successful than the one we did. They were much more stronger riders, so they are of course also much stronger people skiing or climbing than me. But I always love to say, okay, I'm passionate about this objective, and let's do everything I can to go over the limits I think I have, and I think that's what I like to do.
Going over the limits?
Yeah, but my own limits, because if you look at other people's limits, maybe they are not reachable for you, and then it's only disappointment. And
so try to be a better version of yourself every day.
Or at least know what is the best or the highest version of yourself. If you don't try, if you say, I would like to, instead of saying, I want to run a marathon in under 3 hours, just say, I want to run and make the best time I can do, and what does it require to prepare, and put the best preparation in place, and do it and see where you are, and then analyze how you can improve and redo it, etc. I think that's probably a good way to look at things. And if you want to be an entrepreneur, probably it's also good to say, okay, this is the topic or the solution I would like to propose. And let's put in place the things that are required to do that, and move step by step and see where you can go by delivering the best of your abilities. And yeah.
So do you think actually people born with that quality, they cannot develop it on the way?
I think nobody knows that, right? How much is in your gene, DNA when you're born, and how much is your background, context, family. I think it's a mix, but at the end you are who you are, and you can influence, I think, partially a little bit when you are adults, but probably you have a sort of way of what are your best version of yourself, and then you have to capitalize on that. And if you go 180 degrees from this, it's usually much harder or impossible, right? So for me, that's what I think. So probably the sport career, right? Because of course, although I was in elite, in my 20s, I started earlier, and probably, helped me to first validate what you like, and because I also tried other sports which were less like, I would say, as intense in terms of, cycling is a very physically and mentally difficult one, and also it requires a lot of hours of training, because races are long and it's an endurance sport, so it needs a lot of devotion. It's outside, so you have to go when it's cold and rainy and so on. And there is a lot of psychological pressure as well. Yeah. It probably helped me to afterwards first say, okay, if I could do this, I probably can also handle angry investors or unhappy customers without panicking and so on.
Let's go then to 2004 when you started Nexthink. So before that, you've been working in Cisco for almost 8 years, right?
Yes.
And then you started Nexthink. So how did you get an inspiration and idea of starting a company?
I would say it was a lot of coincidence, but in summary, I would say you meet the right people at the right time. So the right people means people who inspire you with I didn't have the original idea, right? I was not the one in the artificial intelligence laboratory working on our initial idea. It was Pedro, the other co-founder, and Patrick. But I met them at a time where I had, let's say, sufficient experience with the market in IT and so on through Cisco. And also, so that's what I could bring to them, right? Because I couldn't bring them programming skills and so on. They had much more than me, but I could bring to them, I understand the market, I have some network of people we can go to. But also it was the right time for me in terms of readiness to leave the corporate position. Pretty comfortable at that time for me, but also a little bit boring. So I was on this, initially I would have never quit this position because it was a unique opportunity at Cisco in 1998, 7, I don't remember when I started. Was really the boom of internet, early days, it was great. I learned a lot. I met a lot of brilliant people there. But at some point, I was starting to, I didn't have any excitement it was not really hard. I knew what I had to do, the mechanics of the company, and then you meet these people with new ideas, fresh minds, and you say, gosh, this is something I like. I mean, it's very risky, but suddenly you go what you are made for, probably.
How did you meet Pedro and Patrick? How you knew that would be a good co-founder trio, kind of?
I didn't, so how? Well, coincidence, but it was related to the job, some of the activity I was doing at Cisco. And one was to evaluate some early technologies for a fund where Cisco had invested money, and I was one of the, let's say, advisor. So I had some missions, like 5, 6 every year. And somebody who was working at this fund left the fund and went working for EPFL, the university. And he was in charge of incubation and so on, of entrepreneur. And he noticed a few promising ones. And I got contacted to just, hey, have a look at them. And one, just kept in my mind over the weekends. And that's how I contacted them privately to say, I would love to talk again and see if we can evaluate the options to work closer together. So it was pure, as I said, coincidence, but at the right time with the right people. Of course, at that time, I'd never done any entrepreneurial business. They didn't, no one was used to that, and I didn't know how important it is, the complementary between the founders' mindset and characters and background. So I didn't check that, but luckily we had a good, it worked well, really well all together. But if I had to do it again, of course I would pay much more attention to, okay, where do I put ego of everybody and how people, what they like, what they don't like, how their emotional state and so on. Because that's how sometimes, or a lot of times, companies collapse, is because the founders, they just don't get along anymore. Too many conflicts, too many diversions and so on. But luckily that worked. So
how do you think your experiences from working in the corporate world in Cisco helped you into your startup entrepreneurship journey? Any learnings you specifically think was?
For me, the number one thing that helped was the network. Because, if you help someone at some point, they can help you also at another point in time, or recommend you or whatever. But you have a sort of, it's not just a network like I have some names and phone numbers in my contact list. It was like a trusted connection with not a lot of people, but a few, and enough to get started, right? And I see that also when I meet very brilliant, smart people out of university labs and so on. They have maybe some great ideas, even great products sometimes, but they don't know anyone. And sometimes they know who they should talk to, but they don't get any response. And that's because, there is no trusted connection that can link the right people together. For me, that helped a lot. Of course, to know also technically what is on the market, it helped, but that was like 20%. The rest was really about relationships.
Very interesting. You've been on the journey, you've been through some pivots, right? Some pivotal situations.
Oh, yes.
With the Nexthink.
Yes.
So tell us about that. How do you guys know when, and how do you take decision to pivot?
Yeah.
What is your experience?
So, we started with this technology in 2004-05, which was AI based. So at that time you couldn't sell AI, right? We can do today. It was actually scaring people out when you said AI, because at that time it was more like it was a technology that failed, right? Somehow, it was known for research and universities and building a computer to play chess, but not really mainstream for all sort of industries. And people were afraid of this idea that you don't configure anything, you just get the answer you want, right? Or the question you should have asked but you didn't have the ID, right? Mm-hmm. So these kind of things. And so we had this for IT network monitoring. So the idea was to say, at that time, there were technologies that could capture traffic information, store it somewhere, and then people were writing, let's say, scripts or rules or alerts to say, if this is happening, let me know, or if this application is slower than 100 milliseconds response time, make an alert, whatever. We said, no, we can take this data and automatically say what is going wrong, what is not supposed to run this way, etc., etc. That was the origin thing. And we thought it was a great capability to be implemented in cybersecurity, because cybersecurity breaches are always anomalies in the IT environment. It's a virus, it's a new application that was never there, it's somebody misusing an existing account, whatever. We could identify a lot of things like that.
But what was the market response?
It was pretty positive with initial customers we had, and also, let's say, the advanced security expert. They would say this is really great because today, the weakest link are all these anomalies and behavior-based problems. But they were also at that time a lot of companies saying, "Hey, this is amazing, but let me first do the basics." It's like you have a house, and I sell you an alarm system, with motion detector, but you don't have locks, right? So you're going to say, "Hey, let me first place locks on the doors and windows and so on, and then I will do the advanced thing."
So this is about timing, right? And
it was a little bit
right
about timing, yes. But also the pivots here, because we ended up unicorn and leader in Gartner, analyst, Magic Quadrant, and so on, Forrester, etc., in a completely different field, which is now called digital employee experience. So the way we pivoted was not by ourselves saying, "Hey, let's not do security, do this," right? It was more our customers, when we visited them, let's say the first 10, 20, they were starting to use the product in a different way. Because of course, to see anomalies for security breaches or misuse of passwords or whatever, you have to have a complete inventory of what's running and how is it running and when it is used and so on. And they say, "Oh, this is great just for knowing if our employees are using the software we deliver to them, or if those applications are actually capable to run properly, the email cannot be sent, or I cannot print an invoice or whatever." Figured out this because the data was there, but that was not positioned for this purpose. But then we started to say, okay, why not? And we started to add up, right? And saying, okay, we have this a new, new way of looking at networks in general, right? And we were sounding like the sort of IBM or Microsoft gigantic platform for everything. But of course we were not, because we were small and not so scalable at this time. But you could do a lot of different things. And that led us to a lot of confusion and also a lot of weaknesses, because then you do a few things in security, but not everything, and people point at it, this is not so perfect, and so on. In performance, same thing, and then in inventory, same thing. So, and then employees, they were required to be so good at so many things. It was really hard to find them, train them, keep them, and even for ourselves was complicated. So at some point we refocused completely the whole thing, and then we had two choices. Was going after an existing market, like security, network security, cyber security, endpoint security, whatever, or create a new market, which was this digital employee experience, which is somehow the new way of doing service desk, support desk, whatever, actually to eliminate it and automate it completely. So going from reactive to proactive IT for employees. That was the proposal. And I remember this presentation that I did for the whole management team, saying we can do, maybe we could have been successful in security, nobody will ever know. But to say, okay, if we go this way, this is the advantage, this is the gaps we have, etc. If we go that way, this is the challenge, and this is etc. So we took this decision, and I think, of course, retrospectively, it's the best decision, and it's also a decision we should have probably taken earlier, because for a couple of years we struggle with chasing too many things at the same time. And of course, you don't do outstandingly well that one thing, because that's how people look at it, right? They don't buy your product for the entire capabilities, never. They buy it for usually one, maybe two things. And when you focus on that one thing, you have to stand out. Because if you look like anyone else, why should they buy from you? It's new, it's unknown, it's more risky, and so on. So once we focused, we say we're going to be the best product, technology, company, and so on, to do this employee experience that people need for productivity and also employee engagement and satisfaction and so on, and focusing on this. But the price to pay, you somehow forget, trash many years of work, right? And also you frustrate people who believed in security is the way to go, either because they believe in from a market standpoint, or they believe from a emotional or personal preference. Of course, when they realize, hey, but you're not focusing on this anymore, right? I remember this guy who left the company, not angry, just said, hey, you know what? I came here because I'm a passionate security engineer. Now I have nothing to do here, which I fully understood. And I think you have to go, where security is happening full gas, and that wasn't anymore the case. So, but as I always say, it's much better to have a few people who, in a crazy way, they love what you do, than a lot of people who just barely like, right? Because, and you have to have a lot of lovers before you can scale really high.
Really good point.
And you only get those lovers when it's you have attention to details and everything really lines up. Yeah.
Can I ask you personal feelings with the moment when you pivoted, you changed the direction, and then you've got this frustration around you, frustrated people, employees, customers. Personally for you, was it difficult? How did you deal with that?
I felt like that. Well, first of all, I also it was also hard for me. Now it's hard for me because we had other different pivots or different decisions, like to abandon things we started, or at least put it in the freezer and maybe defreeze at some point. But and sometimes there were things I was a strong believer and pushing. I even sold it sometimes to customers. I mean, security at the beginning, I was pitching it to investors and customers, sold it to analysts and So, I mean, maybe one of the first frustrated or that impacted by this decision, I was also concerned a lot, because I also had to go back and say, well, this is our new direction, and so it's not easy to do for sure. But for me, that's the worst was more like we also had ups and downs with through like 2008 financial crisis, where we had to reduce somehow the staff because we couldn't cope with the budget freeze in the market, so we had to lower costs pretty quickly and drastically. That's much harder, right? Because there you basically, it's not, you take decisions that are not caused by your own errors or misjudgment. We were in IT monitoring. I was not in subprime management, so suddenly this impacts you indirectly. And you have to tell people, sorry, you have to go. And I don't know, a month earlier, you were saying, you are here to code the future and, it's going to be so amazing. Here it's much harder because you're contradicting yourself without really be able to, you can justify it, but, sorry, it's not really me, right? But that's a bit hard.
Did you have any tools to support yourself? How were you supporting yourself through these tough periods and ups and downs? Any routines, or what helped you?
Personally?
Personally.
Well, I think I realized that, those sort of adventure if you look, they take huge amount of time to be, put in place. So you're into it for a very long time. So yes, I think it's very important to realize, let's say, two things. Yes, you have to work hard, but you also have to last working hard. So you have to find the right balance, and sometimes you have to sprint fast. So you need energy to sprint, right? So it's not like saying, okay, my 100% limit of work, private balance is here. I don't know, I just say 10 hours a day, and then go, because sometimes you have to do more. So you need to have this reserve, right, of energy. So you have to be organized with that.
How do you do that? What are your tools and secrets?
Well, for me, there is no secret. I just went, probably sometimes too much, and you realize either you're too tired, you start to do less good work, or you get sick, or people around you, your friends, they start to say, hey, you keep talking about your project, I don't care about it, and you don't do anymore your favorite activities, I don't know, skiing,
But were you reacting to those feedback from your friends and people around you? Were
Yes.
that stopping, taking breaks?
Yeah, I did adjust for sure, but also I was, I had other things, right, that I like to do.
Ski,
So
mountain,
I kept it, of course, less than I used to or that I do now, but that helped for sure. Yeah, I think it's important, and also, as I said before or at the beginning, taking time is part of the job, because a lot of the, let's say, game-changing decisions, innovation, solutions we found were almost never in, like, I schedule a meeting for next week to talk about, I don't know, our pricing model. That never revolutionized anything. But this, like, okay, let's me go for a hike, and then suddenly you had this like magical inspiration, and me or others, and next week you come back and say, gosh, we should try that, right? So, or completely informal meeting, you go for take some water or coffee, and you run across a colleague and you start talking about something, and then you say, hey, come on, we have to, and many times was like that. So, and if you don't have this, you don't allow yourself this, in quote, luxury of a little bit of freedom, of like navigate, because people believe, if they see me busy and running around, that's a good sign. But you are missing those opportunities. And I think it's important to have them for that reason.
The day you became a unicorn, what was the feeling?
For me, it's, all these things, you see them coming. Because at some point, when you start to be big enough for this, and way before, let's say when we were at maybe, I don't know, 50 million revenue, ARR, so half of the revenue when we turned unicorn, more or less, you start to have a lot of predictability, and the company is no more really a startup per se. It's already pretty well organized, you have a lot of predictability, processes, the right people are in place. So it was not as, for me, but it's also me, right? Because I'm not like because I didn't find it so hard at this moment. Of course, it's work and make sure things are squared and so on, but for me it was much more excitement, to sign the first contract or deliver the first new, the new things, right? Yeah. But from a certain time, which was way below unicorn status, to that status, we didn't do a lot of revolution. It was more, organizational and changing some processes, people, and so on. But it's less, it's less vibrating, right?
As you said in one of the interviews, the best and funnest part of starting a company is the early stage, right?
Yeah, and you know what? When I meet early employees, founders today, what do we talk about? We'd always talk about stories from early days, those crazy moments of uncertainty, surprise, those crazy things we did with, just a few people. You say how much things we've accomplished. Of course, it was maybe a bit shaky, right? It's more like a house of cards, but it's there. Now it's more like squared and validated
Different.
by a proper architect. But then it's less, you don't have
Exciting.
this. Yeah, so it's different for that reason. So, but of course you're proud and you say, okay, this is great, because you don't get there if you don't start and if you don't build the initial blocks that allows that. But you are there because of so many other people. I mean, I cannot be thankful enough to people who are still at Nexthink and doing a great job, people who were in the middle of the growth, arrived later, left before. They're also part of the reason why it's there,
Okay.
because everybody who did a great job at certain time, they were there, it was the right moment for them, the company was right for them at this moment, maybe not earlier, maybe not later, and if they weren't there, we probably wouldn't have done it. So
Yesterday when we met at this media reception and you were sharing your story, you told about the house behind unicorn, but then you said, actually, don't think unicorn, think camel. Tell us about that. What is this thing with camel and why you
I
associate
said
it?
that because you have to always look what's behind. It's like I don't know, if you say, you look at the guy with the yellow jersey in Tour de France finishing first, in an amazing, crazy race, so hard, but you have to look behind what it takes to get there in terms of commitment and training and sacrifice and everything, and also a lot of problems that they have to overcome. So the unicorn is just a fictional thing it's like a little bit like a label, or it's like a medal around your neck, but it's worth nothing itself, right? What's worth is the camel you've built, which is a real animal, first of all. So you have to build a real thing to sell a dream. So you have that dream. Even at the beginning, you make people dream about potential, but you have to deliver something concrete. And the right concrete thing, I think, to deliver, if you take the same analogy of a four-leg animal, I think the camel is the closest, because it endures very difficult, journeys in changing weather condition. It doesn't need a lot of resource. I'm not an expert, but they can go like hundreds of kilometers without drinking anything, right? So, and
Close to what founders do.
Exactly. So you have to be very frugal, and you have to go through a lot of unpredicted situations. And I think they do that very well as animals. And we should not forget that the first goal of a founder is to have this camel well trained and ready, and maybe it turns unicorn at some point, but I don't think it should be a goal, because you can have a lot of success with different endings, and the main endings anyway is the journey that you live through, that allows you to either just have this talk and have some stories to tell if that's what you want, but mainly the things that you were maybe missing at the beginning, the trusted network, all these lessons learned about pivoting, hiring, market positioning. You have to live them to really fully understand what it takes to do all this. And if your camel is not a unicorn, but you know how to build a camel, you can do a second one, your second project, and you have a much better chance to take it off higher, because you don't have to learn everything. I think we were very lucky to be beginners, all of us, to be capable to learn on the way and reach that. That's a lot of luck as well, because it could have turned out differently. But also maybe for me, I can say that was not my first hard project, because maybe sport career was one, so I had to learn a few things. I had the network through the Cisco, so that was a little bit, not my initial take on difficult missions.
What is your main learning about hiring through this period with Nexthink?
No, that's a good question. So I would say two learnings. The first one is hire managers for their capability to hire really well. So basically, for me, the best were those managers who said, if I come to lead, I don't know, France or Germany, or be the director of engineering, I bring with me these four people, right? Because I've worked with them and I know they are good at this and that, and that's how I will be successful in your company. And that's always a great sign. And second, they must be continuously and obsessively focused on hiring, keeping the greatest team as possible. That, for me, that's very important. The managers who look not too much in, they say, oh, we have HR, they will take care. That doesn't work, at least for a startup. And then when it comes to how to hire, I think it's, what I learn is attitude beats aptitude. So which means if somebody doesn't know a skill, a technique, I don't know, a concept, whatever, they can learn, right? But if they are smart with the right spirit or state of mind, the right values and ethics that fit the company and the purpose, I think that's the most important. Because if they don't, even the smartest CVs, they can destroy your team and your journey, or at least it's going to be you're going to lose a lot of time, require a lot of effort to recover from that. So hire on attitude is key.
Love it.
I also learned how to spot those things, because it's hard to ask the question directly. Like, do you know how to code JavaScript? That's easy, right? But if you say, are you somebody with a good ethics? That doesn't make any sense, because it's a question people will say yes. But so you have to figure it out with the criteria you're looking for in attitude, how to spot, where these people are and
Any concrete example? And
yeah,
tip?
for me, so an example is about energy they have left, right? Because people focus usually on the past, right? This is all I did, this is how good I was. So if it's a salesperson, they will say, I never missed a quarter, I always overachieved. That doesn't mean you will in the future, because if you are tired and not anymore completely, energized, it will be too hard and you don't have the energy. And so you have to make sure they are ready for the mission that they have in front of them, right? It's like if you said, I've climbed Everest, now you go for Mont Blanc, which is lower, but it's still a big effort. And it's not because you did something else that it's going to be easy. So it's not about the goal, it's about the path to the summit. And do you understand what it takes to go there? Are you ready to actually do it again?
How do you feel they're ready and they're on that level of energy? Intuition?
Well, you usually you feel that, I would say. And you also hear how they talk, right? If you say, okay, what is the first thing you do when you arrive? If they say, oh, I'm gonna, look for the assistant so that she can or he can book me, like, okay, that's not a good sign, right? Or things like that.
The right answer will be?
Well, depends the job. But if it's a salesperson, for me, I call my 3 big friends, head of IT at company XYZ, and I tell them, I don't have to even know what we do. I tell them, hey, I've changed jobs. I have to show you what we do. It's amazing. And they get a meeting. If they say, well, first, I don't know, I have to learn, you have to train me, well, that's too...
I see the point.
Yeah,
You told me yesterday that you just came back from Norway for like 2 weeks ago.
Correct.
Skiing, mountaineering,
Yes.
and putting yourself in a situation with low oxygen. Do you think this is something closer to a founder life as well? When you mentioned you were training yourself to how to make decisions.
Okay, I didn't thought about it, but now, I would say the high altitude thing with lack of oxygen, with the altitude, low pressure, your body has to function with less oxygen, and therefore you don't have enough blood cells, so you start to slow down, etc. I would say the similarity is more like, because it's an exponential function, so 100 meter more at 4,000, from 4,000 to 4,100 has nothing to do than 7,000 to 7,100. It's like 100 times harder, those additional 100 when you're higher. And I would say in entrepreneurship, when you're close to the end, like signing the deal with the investor, with the customer, or with this great employee that probably will join, this little thing is the hardest, right? Is to close it, right? Get the money, get the signature, get the okay, etc. And you have to say it's going to be even harder. Although it looks closer, you have to be ready to say, okay, I put so much energy to get so close, I have to double down. and I have to be ready. You know, I should not like just let it happen. You know, I hear often people say, yeah, you know, I'm waiting for the answer, it should be okay. Well, but what do you do every day for that, right? And if you do nothing, it's like I'm 100 meters below the summit and I'm not moving anymore. You never get there, right?
Very interesting
yeah,
point.
so and you have to understand every step will be harder, and maybe not, right? Because sometimes, you know, you end up finally feeling good close to the summit, and then it's not as hard as you thought, but it could be. You never know in advance, but you have to be ready for that.
My last question for today is about a piece of advice. So here at Start Summit, we have both startup founders, investors, corporates, people from the ecosystem, and a lot of talents, a lot of young people curious about entrepreneurship, wanting to start a startup, wanting to work in the ecosystem, and so passionate about making a big change in the world.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give them, to those who are thinking of starting a company or in the beginning of doing that? What advice would it be?
I would say, don't panic when things are not going the way you want, because you will lose many points to win a game. So every time you lose one, learn from it and don't, you know, keep moving. It's very important, and don't panic, don't stand still, because, you know, so keep moving, even if you move a little bit slower because you have to think, keep moving, that's important. But at the same time, don't become overconfident when you win a point. Because then you'll be, on one hand, you know, if you stand still, you're going to be the sort of non-ambitious person. But if you become overconfident because you just get like a first customer or whatever, a first pilot, and you start to talk like you've changed the world, you're going to be arrogant, and that's not going to be good either. And I have to say that sometimes it's a bit polarized when I meet entrepreneurs. They are either here or there, right? So you have to have this good balance between positive ego and good humility as well. I think that's how you also convince people. You have to be passionate but not overconfident, and also you have to be passionate but not destroyed at the first hurdles.
Great advice. And lucky startups who are now working with you as because you're now helping, mentoring, coaching.
A few, yeah.
And I like your title now, investor and friend. That says a lot about your personality as well.
Yes, because I think when you have the luxury to interact with projects as a hobby, I'm talking about me. Huh? It's a luxury. I don't have to do that for a living. I do that because I enjoy meeting fresh minds and also new ideas and different way of working. And I think it's very good to keep your brain a little bit active and open to new stuff. But it's still a luxury. It's a complete luxury, and so why would I? And that's why you have to do it that in a friendship manner. It doesn't mean like you're not like involved or you're not interested, but you know it has to be at least friendly at professional level.
Okay, thank you so much. I think we are
that was
good.
Great.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you too.